Call meeting to order. First on the agenda is, let's turn over to the mayor.
After our executive session last week, I think the discussion centered on hearing from the Jessees again, and then hearing from the DA's office about their opioid lawsuit. So Mr. Tom Jessee's here to update you on their lawsuit, and then we'll have a meeting with the DA or his representative at another day.
Just to bring it all up to date where we are. The case has progressed very nicely. As you know from my last meeting, the cases throughout the United States have been all sent, those that are filed in federal court were sent to a judge in the Northern District of Ohio for management. I've spoken to, we have 15 counties now that I represent, my group represents from Tennessee. We talked to Washington County last week and are on the agenda. The committee gave us the go-ahead, so I assume in August, barring something changing, we were successful there, so I'll take it to 16, and we've got, I think, 6 more meetings out in West Tennessee. Same questions everybody has. I'm just going to review. Most of you have already heard this. The case, if you file your case, allow us to file your case as you originally voted you thought you wanted to. Then it'll be filed in Greenville Federal Court. It has a series of allegations against wholesalers, distributors. There are no individual pharmacies. Your contract that was sent for you to consider provides. We're not suing any local pharmacies. We're not suing any local doctors. The claims are consumer protection violation, federal RICO, which is racketeering, corrupt practices, negligence, negligent misrepresentation, fraud, misrepresentation. Essentially what we're saying is that both the pharmaceutical manufacturers and the wholesale distributors have violated the law in numerous ways. How does that compare to the DA's case? Well, I won't speak for Dan Armstrong, but he and I spoke at the last Greenville meeting. Greenville's his case has already been filed for some time. As Dan said, and I think they quoted him in the paper, Tom has a good lawsuit, we have a good lawsuit. It's like buying 2 lottery tickets. If you win both, you're great. If you win one, you're great. If we lose them all, then nobody's done anything. Because remember, our fee under your contract, if you allow us to file it, is 30% of the recovery. If you don't get anything, you don't owe us anything. We front all the expenses. If you don't get anything, you don't owe us back for the expenses. The mayor up in Campbell County, we met with, that was one of our first, that is per capita, the worst county in the United States for opioid deaths per capita. He asked about, well, we're a small county, we're going to pay all the expenses. No, we prorate them. Those checks that would be written for depositions that we took about your county here would be part of your expenses. The joint expenses would be those expenses we pay experts to testify, etc. So it's a prorated system. As for example, we have 2 DEA agents that are acting as experts in our case. The DA's case, the case brought by the DAs, you've heard me speak. I don't know that they can do that, but they've done it and they have a right to. It's pared down now to primarily the State Drug Dealer Act. If he can bring it, more power to him. But that's a case that, as you've seen in the paper, you don't control. They didn't ask you to file it, and you don't control it. It's controlled by his office, and the settlement would go, I assume, to his whole district. I have no idea, because that's why I have a problem with him being able to bring it and collect money. The state drug dealer statutes the illegal drug dealer statutes, this state's is identical, almost word for word, to Oklahoma, and theirs was struck down as unconstitutional. I hope he can continue. The more pressure, the better. I have no argument with him wanting to try it. The state of Tennessee, since I was here the last time, filed their own case. Our Attorney General did not file a case for some time. He's filed his case. If you saw in the paper just 2 weeks ago, there was a fight over whether that complaint would become public. Well, last week it became public. It's 285 pages long. It primarily alleges Purdue Pharmaceuticals because our Attorney General settled with Purdue Pharmaceuticals some years ago on a totally different case relating to reporting to the state. Well, he's alleging they violated that, and he's running that case. The thing we've talked about in all the county cases is the one difference. The reason the original counties in West Virginia opted out of their Attorney General's case was they want to control the funds. Some of you were on this commission when the tobacco litigation was settled, and you never got a dime of it. It all went to the state. And that's the argument as to why the problem of homelessness because of opioids is not a state problem. It's a problem right here in Hamilton County. The jail is full of people that are addicts. The state's not going to be able to run your jail for you. So we've looked at it, if you recall, those of you that were here when I spoke the last time, a local problem requires a local solution. That's why we filed the cases. As far as it's going very well. Initially, the judge, who's just, I've never seen one more. I just finished last year with Judge Greer, class action milk case for Southeastern dairy farmers, and I thought Judge Greer did as good as I've ever seen any judge work at class action. This is not a class action. This judge is just the most remarkable guy I've seen work. The reason they picked the judge is because he settled 40-some hundred chemical cases that were individual lawsuits. And remember, your case is not a class action. It's an individual lawsuit. You control your case. Nobody can make you take a dime that you don't want to take. So, they wanted this judge because he had done so well getting that other giant case done. So he's had his first meeting. That went well. Met the lawyers. Elected the committee because there's so many plaintiffs' lawyers, so many defense lawyers. So he had those of us that represent claimants pick a committee. We picked 6. We have 2 lawyers from our group on that committee of 6. That's who he deals with the plaintiffs to start with, and they picked 1 lawyer from each of the 19 defendants. And then he brought up the fact we need to start talking about getting this case settled, and one of the defense lawyers stood up and said, wait a minute, we've just got started. We don't know enough about this case to settle it. His comment was, there's 400 and some people dying every hour in the United States because of opioids. This is something we need to settle. But before we could even settle it, as he pointed out, we would have to have detailed discussions on what model you would settle it on. So he charged the lawyers with starting to talk about, if there was a settlement, how would it work? What would you do? How would it be paid? So those committees have been meeting. He then said that he would pick 5 counties or 5 entities out of Ohio, because just as you all are concerned, my other counties are concerned, you're not going to try your case in northern Ohio. Your case, if you go to trial, will be tried right here in the courthouse in federal court in Greenville. The Campbell counties will be in Knoxville, and Fentress counties will be down in Nashville. You'll have your individual trial in this state with a jury from this state if these cases were not to settle. So he picked 5 from Ohio because he knows He has the absolute authority to try those because he's an Ohio federal judge. After that, he'll start looking at how to group other groups if there's not some kind of settlement as they go forward. The next thing he did, which just happened about 10 days ago, we got what's called a plaintiff's information sheet, which he developed, the judge did, and it's a series of about 6 pages of questions. And what it mainly asks is to know more about you, the county, or the counties we represent, the cities that are represented, the Indian tribes that are represented. So the paperwork that we would be filling out if we get you filed, and he's now said it that as new cases get filed, you have so many days to get this paperwork done. We've got meetings scheduled with the counties we've already represented to fill it out, but it basically starts with what is your form of government, mayor, commission, your forms of government, goes through who's involved with management of various problems, who runs the jail, what kind of statistics you have. Questions like, has Hamlin County ever alerted the state or federal government or DEA about any problem? Has your jail ever filed a complaint with the DEA? So it's as interesting a questionnaire as I've seen done, and the judge put that together. And it's not big in depth, go pull all the records for the last 20 years. It's pull some records and get us some base information. Simple stuff like the population, what other information they were requesting about the problems here. The other thing is he was adamant that the DEA would release all 50 states, what's called ARCOS data, which is, I can tell you to the minute what pill went where now. DEA kind of pushed back about that and didn't want that released. And after some squabbling, he's released all that data. On July 16th, because of the questionnaires, your lawyer, if you file a case, me, if you chose us, will then have immediate access through the data bank for that data. So we can start really painting a picture of what kind of volume of opioids came in. Trying to think what else. The DEA's case up in Judge Booty in Sullivan County has allowed that to keep going. They've done some motions to dismiss, which were denied initially, so that's moving down the road too. The Attorney General's just got his going. There's a meeting scheduled for the middle of next month in Ohio to sort of, again, report to the court where all the counties are. We've got a total of 423 entities. When I say we, the group of lawyers that I work with that basically started this. That's their group. As I told you, we've got 15 counties in Tennessee that I'm responsible for with them. That sort of updates you on everything where we are. Nobody has ever begun talking about what kind of money is out there, or when will it settle, what are we doing. I mean, this is plowing very new ground in many respects. But I feel very good, quite frankly. What's the hardest thing to do in a class action case or any kind of giant litigation is keep it managed, keep everybody focused and keep them working. And this judge has just done a remarkable job. So I know you all voted one time. We talked about representing you. Mr. Capps has the proposed contract and the form that we would have to sign, and I think even has a copy of our complaint we drafted for Hamlin County. If you want us to file it, he just needs to get the contract signed and authorize us to get it filed. Anybody got any questions?
What percentage of the population of Hamlin County has a drug problem?
Drug problem defined as prescription drug problem or illegal.
Any drug.
That's the problem with the defense of this case, is that you can't tell us, this is what the defense says, you can't tell us whether it's prescription drugs or illegal drugs. And if it's illegal drugs, it can be opioid, morphine-based drugs as well. So their argument in their defense is two things. You can't tell us legal or illegal. You can only tell us how many deaths, how many whatever that you have, and that's what we want to get from the ARCOS data that we get access to on the 16th. And then number two, they say not one legal pill was ever given to anybody in Hamlin County or any other county unless the doctor wrote the prescription, which in actuality is not the case, because even they, the drug companies, admit that they estimate there's a 7% loss on every prescription. They have an estimate of how it's being shared. And you know, what's the definition of addiction versus true pain? I mean, one of the things that I can tell you is that we can now show pretty clearly that the 1/3 of any group of people that took prescription opioids, so 30%, have a euphoric high and are addicted. We can show you from the statistics that a prescription for the opioid for a week and the person asks for a month, they're more likely to be on drugs for 6 months. If that prescription continues for 12 months, they're most likely addicted. So you saw how Tennessee changed the law. Now it's 3-day prescriptions, and we're going from there. But you know, an easy number is of the prescriptions for opioids, 30%, 33 1/3% are addicted to them.
Do we have the death rate percentage?
I don't have it with me. I can get it and I'll send it over to the mayor. I didn't bring it. I apologize. I've got so many of them. I walked out and didn't grab it somewhere. But we have the pill count. And we have the death rates. Now, again, we don't have the death rate based on exactly proving on any given day that these are all prescription drugs. You know, we have the death rate from overdoses. But, you know, the problem is, you know, you hear the word fentanyl and you assume, well, nobody's getting that without prescription. Well, it's coming in boxes from China and it's out on the street. I mean, I can show you now the statistics according to what we saw. You take Detroit, Chicago, and work your way down the interstate, just essentially come through Ohio into West Virginia. The death rate increased once they started clamping down on the opioids, since their cases were filed first and everybody started talking about it. The increase in heroin, illegal fentanyl, death rates just starts up. I mean, there's an article I read, I think it was out of the Chicago paper, where the illegal drug dealers have now tried to figure out a better distribution system because they know where to target the addicts. You know, pain clinics, et cetera, et cetera. And they're starting to try to get out the word, apparently, in a very organized fashion. There's a fantastic book. If you don't ever do anything, you don't hire us, you don't hire anybody, you don't file a lawsuit, whatever you do, read a book called Dreamland. Dreamland. It is an amazing discussion of the intention of the pharmaceutical manufacturers of opioids to be in the drug business. And there's discussion comparing Pablo Escobar, the famous Mexican drug dealer, to South America, to certain legal companies in America. And the guys, the legal companies did a whole lot better job of running it than the illegal companies did. I mean, it fascinated me. We did the price fixing for the southern, as I said, southeastern dairy farmers. Dairy Farmers of America Incorporated could teach the drug dealers how to manipulate prices. I mean, it was that organized.
But it's so open. I was downtown Detroit last week. It's so open about the drug trade downtown Detroit. They're doing it right on the street, and everybody, and no law enforcement involved or something.
But where you gonna put them?
That's true.
Where you gonna put them? Who's gonna detox them? What's gonna happen? I mean, it doesn't. If this case is successful and they wrote us a check tomorrow that you could spend for 5 years, you would make a difference, but you won't stop it. You know.
You mentioned that there were 19 defendants in the case, and I assume that Purdue Pharma is the #1 defendant. And then that
Actually, our #1 defendants initially were the wholesalers, which is Amerisource, Cardinal Health, and McKesson. Those three. And the reason those three is because they, I never remember which county I updated or what, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself. The Controlled Substance Act, created in 1970, is almost identical to our liquor. We have wholesalers. Why do we have wholesalers to sell liquor in Tennessee? Why doesn't the retailer and the manufacturer just get together? Because all the manufacturer's goal is to sell as much liquor as they can, and the retail sales. So the government thought we need to put somebody in the middle.
To really make the money.
To really make the money, but to figure out where it's going, and it's simply to get our tax money. So let's keep up with it. So when Congress passed the Controlled Substance Act, best way to figure out where all these controlled substances are going is let's just do what we did with liquor. And we put the burden on the wholesalers. They have to get a license, and they have to report to the DEA. And I don't want any of y'all seen, if you can go back and pull up the stories on 60 Minutes, it gives some of the best, just great summaries. There's been 3 reports. They just didn't turn it in. They did not turn in suspicious. When you got a town in West Virginia with one pharmacy putting out millions of opioid pills, and there's only 22,000 people in that county, it should have been a red flag instantly. So the first 3 big ones are the manufacturers, then Purdue, and the rest of it. Of all of them, Purdue has settled some claims past for failure to report their responsibility to the state health agencies. And Teva Pharmaceuticals, TEVA, has settled, I want to say 6 counties in California on their own. So if you had to compare this to tobacco, tobacco was litigating. R.J. Reynolds was never allegedly going to settle it. And Lorelei, which is the British company, settled. Once they settled, it all collapsed in on itself. So who knows?
In this particular case, we side up with you. We're not suing Purdue.
Yeah,
I
we've
thought
got.
we were suing the wholesalers.
No, we had just the wholesalers originally. Then when we got more data, we added manufacturers simply because we added the RICO. Now, one of the things that, no matter what the dispute is among lawyers, and if you get 2 lawyers in the room, we'll argue about anything. No matter what dispute is among the lawyers, the only place the RICO case can be brought, the racketeering and corrupt practices, is in federal court. Tennessee doesn't have civil RICO. So that's one of the big things about being in federal court. We have access to that.
what types of businesses then compile the remaining 14 defendants?
Well, what you've got is Purdue, and Purdue has a limited partnership and a corporation, and Purdue Frederick Company Inc. They do business under 3 hats. Teva does business under 3 hats. Johnson & Johnson, and then Ortho, McNeil, Jensen, they do business under 7 hats. Watson Pharmaceutical is a wholesaler. Then you get down to some smaller wholesalers. You know, we looked, and in the West Virginia case, for some reason, Walgreens runs a wholesale operation up there. And so they, in their case in West Virginia, they've got Walgreens wholesale. You know, an interesting story, when they caught those pill mills down in Florida that directly related to the pill mills that got indicted in Knoxville, that they were showing that the pills were coming all up through here. McKesson and Walgreens each had division licenses for, let's just say, the South Florida division of McKesson had a license. Well, they fined them and suspended their license for a year. Well, they got another piece of the pie up here under a different small corporation, so they just moved the pill sales around. So, you know, McKesson's the third largest, at least it was a month ago, the third largest corporation in the United States. I mean, they sell pencils to pills to everything for anything in healthcare. As I said, we'd love to represent you. We'd love to get it filed. We're real pleased so far with how well it's going. Doesn't mean it won't bog down, and our grandchildren will settle this case someday. But I'm thinking that everybody that's getting in is, we see new counties, new cities coming in every day. Sometimes having some experience in class actions, I've wondered if some of these defendants were waiting to see just how many plaintiffs would get in, so when they do possibly get it settled, they'd be able to settle everybody. Now, the easiest way to think about it, and I use this as an example, one form of settlement of claims that would be comparable is in a bankruptcy situation when let's just say, you remember some years ago, Dalcon Shield was an IUD used, and it was causing women major problems. Well, they filed bankruptcy. So the court had to come up with how are we going to deal with all these claims. It wasn't a class action, because how do we put them all together? So they went and they looked, and if you had the IUD in, basically the smallest claim is we'll put up money to take it out. It went up the line to if the woman had had a hysterectomy because of it, with some very short medical proof sent to them, they got a check. They're doing it now in mesh cases. You all see on TV all the time, mesothelioma, advertised all the time. You think that case never ended. It is ended. It's over. It has been over. Most of those companies filed bankruptcy a long time. Johns Manville filed bankruptcy a long time ago. But that's the pot of money that is sitting out there for people to apply for as they get the diagnosis. So there's many ways this case can be looked at being resolved, but who knows? Anybody got any other questions?
Didn't you have, sorry I'm late, but the last time you were here, you gave a breakdown, and you said there's 67 available pills per person in Hamilton County.
Right.
Or in Hamilton County.
I
Yeah.
think that's the state of Tennessee too.
Yeah, it's about the same.
For everybody.
For everybody.
Everybody.
You know, on any given day, I mean, the numbers are astronomical. Every human being in a particular county having how many pills?
Well, have you, what does the district attorney about this,
It's interesting with the district attorneys. Dan and I have gone from being somewhat antagonistic to each other to, as I said, Dan made us all smile at the last Greene County meeting. He said it's like buying 2 lottery tickets. Washington County, which is our DA, they're in the same lawsuit with Dan. Washington County called me and said, would you come over, present, we'd like to join with you all. And I said, well, you all, don't forget, you've got one going with the district attorney. They said, well, we're okay, they don't mind, we're going forward. I said, okay. So I presented just on July 5th to Washington County again. I had talked to them almost a year ago. So, I mean, you don't have to join any of them. All I would represent to you is that if the state settles their case, it's the state's money. If the DA settles his case, if that is a legitimate, if the district attorney has the authority to collect money and then disperse it, then if he settles his case, I assume he would disperse it to every entity being city and county in his district, versus if you file an individual claim in this federal court case, it's your claim. Only one that controls it is you all. So that's just the difference.
But neither can file a racketeering case, right?
Neither the Attorney General, nobody can file a federal racketeering case unless they're willing to go to federal court. And that's the situation. I don't think the DAs would ever have the authority. I would assume the state's Attorney General could, but I'm thinking he thinks he might do better in state. You know, because he's got a settlement. He had a settlement with Purdue 4 or 5 years ago, for the details of which are basically they had misled the state before. So it's just mainly a situation of you can be the captain of your own ship and run your own lawsuit. You can ride with somebody, or you can just sit back and do nothing and see what happens. I mean, we are plowing not new ground in terms of the argument, but we're plowing new ground with the size and the complexity. You know, a nuisance suit, for example, you know, you knew where the liquor house was, you knew where the tannery was that you wanted to close down. Well, in this nuisance suit, if it was we were trying to close the tannery down, and the tannery would be coming in here going, we don't stink, it's the guy next door that stinks. Well, that's what it's saying now. We make pills, we don't distribute them. The doctors do. And besides all that, you can't prove who all's dying or what, because there's so much illegal drugs out there.
Do you know how many people in Hamilton County have been written those prescriptions? I do as of July 16th. I can tell you exactly how many pills and how many prescriptions were with as soon as they cut loose the Tennessee dam. I've got some of it, but I can tell you to the most recent document once they turn it on July 16th. Our database. But I'll get that to you and send it to the mayor just for y'all to have.
Mr. Jessee, you said a minute ago about the deposition costs. Would you talk about that again?
Well, what you'd be thinking about, let's assume we go to trial.
Okay.
We're going to get ready for trial, and they want to come talk to the sheriff's office about how much of the jail budget is going for rehabilitation or
Yes, sir.
detox. So we would have a court reporter. So that court reporter, let's say we took a deposition all day, that court reporter for here in Hamilton County sends Mr. Capps and I a bill for, I don't know, $800.
Yeah.
And that's a check we would write. That would be an expense that's exclusively Hamilton County's
Yes,
expense.
okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
But what outside of that? Filing fees or?
Well, I can see copy expenses for data that we may get out of your all. Your mayor may bring me a stack that high of stuff and say, we don't have time to copy it. We don't want you to copy it. We'll copy it. We'll index it. We'll get it ready. We go to take a deposition of somebody in Nashville, and I drive to Nashville and back, those sort of things.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be a situation where we're taking depositions in Oklahoma, and you're paying a piece of that pie. It's literally per client what checks are written. I write all the checks out of my office for Tennessee.
So you know to the penny what we did, who we did it for. The things that are the common expense would be the database, experts, because some of those depositions would be shared among every case that's done. We may have to have an expert specifically as it relates to Hamlin County. I mean, Cobb County the other day told us that their budget for health care for their jail, they'd expended their year's budget by like the end of March. So that may take an expert to come in and look at it and go, of those, how many of them were drug-related?
What would be the, pick a number, and I know it's very difficult, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but let's just say if the attorney representative has 30% of the settlement, what would the expenses run? And I know that would be hard, but just pick a, would it be less?
When I did Pigeon River case, which was the first class action environmental case with 6 Tennessee lawyers, one from Mississippi and one from Georgia, about the river over in Cobb County, because we were paying 100% of the experts for that case, each law firm had $210,000 in it. So we had
$1.2
million in that case, but that case was we were paying for all of the experts. I was offered tobacco litigation, we turned it down. That was funny. I told you all that. One of the Mississippi lawyer got in. To get in, each law firm had to commit $100,000 to get in, and $100,000 a year minimum until it's settled, tried, or got dismissed.
Okay.
So the expense primarily comes, my experience, the dairy farmer's case, the biggest one expense that Judge Greer had to approve when we settled that were the experts. I mean, I'll be real candid. I wish I'd been an expert or something instead of a lawyer sometimes, given the size of those checks I write. The experts, they know how good they are, they know why they're being hired, and they know how to bill.
Most important.
Tom, you say that they've given y'all a questionnaire, the judge has, and has given each of the attorneys a copy of that to start filling out?
Yeah, we have it. I sent it to all the counties that the cases are actually pending. I haven't sent you one yet because we haven't filed, but I'll send you one. And it lists the questions that they're looking to have answered.
And you all are free to discuss settlement, but right now, I think, is discovery and everything else, is it not stayed at this point in time? We're not in that group that is stayed?
No, we are, the judge is allowing discovery generally, like the ARCOS data. These forms that are getting filled out will be shared with the defendants. We're stayed from, we're not going to start taking depositions about Hamlin County law.
But there's no scheduling order in the group of counties that you all represent at this point?
No. Only thing we have to do right now, we got to get that questionnaire answered by September 1st. And for example, if I added Washington County next week and added you all the next week, there is a set date. I think it's 45 days from the date your complaint's filed, you answer the questionnaire. So we would answer those questionnaires, and then that's it for now. Other than what I call the national data discovery, that the DEA experts, the DEA data, and large quantities of the defendant's data. But they won't be 30 lawyers invading Hamlin County trying to take depositions in by groups here anytime soon. Although in the Mill case, we had an average of 42 lawyers in here every time something happened. So, anybody got any other questions? thank you all again. Let me know. I'll send you a questionnaire. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody have any other questions? Thank you. Okay, next up is Finance Committee Chairman of the Board.
Yes, I'd like to call the Finance Committee to order, please, and I'd like to find out if any visitors wish to address the committee. If not, in your recurring business, we have the expenditure report. Do we have a motion for the acceptance of the monthly checks?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. In old business, we have the update of Cherokee Park Playground Bathhouse Project. Mayor Britton?
On June 18th, it was after our committee meeting last month, we met with the architect and the contractor, the low bid contractor, reviewed the plans, went over listed some changes to the bathhouse design, and then submitted those to the state, to the grant administrator, and got her response back. I think it was a week ago Friday, and all the changes that we've talked about with the contractor have been approved as long as they meet building codes. And so we submitted that to the architect for him to discuss, to submit to the contractor. And then once we hear back from them, we'll bring it to you. So that's where we are right now. We've got a list of changes, we've got approval as long as they meet building codes. Now it's in the hands of the architect and the builder.
Would we be better off to rebid that?
I think it depends on what they come back with.
Yeah.
I mean, it's your own decision.
Yeah.
Well, I just know it was the ones that we briefly discussed. This sounds awful expensive to me. You know, when you got bid 40 to 60,000.
Yeah.
So, you know, let's pick a number and say 250 now, that's still $350 square foot. Something's not right. I don't know what it is. I think we just need to look at it real close. I'd be curious to know how they're gonna do it. I went in there and looked at it. You know, it's just, and we'll talk about this later, the sidewalk stuff down there, we eliminate that one side. I don't know how they're gonna have to do a whole lot of digging more than in my mind. Or unless, of course, we're looking at one dimension on the drawing. You know, that thing's up under the bank, what, 5 feet in the back? 6 feet or whatever it is, it seems like it'd be.
Yeah, you move it to the left side.
Yeah. We'll know that though within the next 2
We'll know
weeks, maybe.
before commission meeting.
Okay.
So, Mayor Britton, that does not require a vote, correct? Any discussion? Any further discussion? Item 5 is new business. We have a bid award for new commercial grade cabinet washer extractors for Hamilton County Jail. Mayor Britton?
The new washers were requested by the Sheriff's Department in this year's budget, in the New Year's budget. We put together the specs and only received one bid, and the low bids in your packet.
Do we have a motion to accept the bid?
I'll make a motion.
Do we have a second? Any further discussion?
What is a cabinet washer extractor?
Washers.
They're a little more expensive.
Don't say that loud.
Bigger words,
more money.
This thing is 20+% more capacity, I think, in Gino.
Yes, sir. Commercial water.
It's a monster.
Oh, yeah. But it is kind of, it's like you put food in it, don't you? Cabinet.
Okay, do we have any other discussion? All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. You have your items of interest, that doesn't require.
I got a question on that, though. We don't have no veteran service officer. Where's this money going to the veteran service? We don't have no.
We're reimbursing Greene County and Jefferson County.
Oh, okay, right, right.
We're having, the office is open 2 days a week.
Okay.
Anything else? All right. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thanks, sir. Next is the Public Service Committee. Chairman Davis.
I'll call this committee order. Anyone wish to address this? I see none. Old business, we have none. And the new business, we have amendment to the property management code again. Mayor Britton, would you address that?
We've got, constables are enforcing the property maintenance code. We had a meeting about 10 days ago, just to get us updated on that, and it's been a slow process, but I think we've worked out some kinks. To help them enforce the code, we need to make some adjustments to it. And so that's what's in your packet. Specifically, I think dealing with rubbish, and some of the items that are scattered in yards and that kind of thing. Also with stagnant water, those are a couple of specific areas.
We may talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Folks, we've got some situations in our county that defy anything that we have in our property, current property maintenance ordinance. We have a residence that has a yard full of barrels, boxes, grown-up weeds, just a mess that it really creates a health hazard as much as anything. We don't have the language in our current ordinance that will allow us to cite these folks and go into court with at least a good idea that we're going to be successful in getting it cleaned up. The stagnant water, I think, is a real important thing. I know there are people here who are concerned about stagnant water, and everybody ought to be, because what we're getting spread by insects and mosquitoes can be pretty scary. But the language that, as I understand it, this is just for your consideration here today, not to vote on unless somebody feels strongly they want to bring it up. I'm not sure we have time to have brought it up in order to take it to the county commission.
It's on the agenda for the county commission meeting, if you don't want to vote on it as a committee.
But you can if you choose to.
You want to put it on the agenda for
It is
the
on the
commission, let's
agenda.
vote it then. Yeah, we need that, let's do that today.
Where's this property at?
The property that,
All over.
there are a couple of different locations.
Harmony.
Harmony Circle is one that comes to immediate mind. There are a couple of others that are just as bad. And I drove out on the Buell Chapel Road this past weekend. We're gonna do something about that too.
It's, Johnny, it's almost like people are defying us to do something.
Oh, it's just like this right here.
I mean, it's just, it's,
Yes, sir.
Chris, didn't we limit the enforcement of our codes to subdivisions only? And we'll keep an eye on the county, where most of the...
That's some language, if you read this, there's language in there that can, if you all choose, you can limit it to subdivisions only. And they have.
That's what we voted on.
It's not fair.
Except for cars. Cars are not subdivision only. We've enforced the car regulation throughout the county to the best of our ability. But it's not that simple either. But the primary problems we've got are within subdivision. Harmony Circle is right smack dab in the middle of the subdivision.
That's right.
And you would not, if you want to go drive by there and check it out, just do that for your own benefit.
Drive by Holder Drive too.
Holder Drive.
Santa Creek Road's cheap.
Holder Drive, we took care of, and now it's right back the way it was.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
It's right off of, McBride.
Yeah.
Yes. Went by there just the other day, worse than it's ever been.
Yeah, I know.
So that's another,
Hauling it in there every day.
I mean,
That's almost one that's just, like I said, sticking their nose up and say, do something about it.
well, we got mentally ill people out there that are hoarders, and I feel for them, but we can't let that impact the rest of the folks in the neighborhood.
I think the code enforcement officer, we use a little bit of judgment. I know there were some issues like on some farmland, because I know if you're doing certain things, you've got your barrels out there. Poison comes in. I just don't see that anybody's gonna rush in there and say, get those out of the way. We need, at the end of the day, clean up houses. Would that be fair?
That's the focus right now.
You know what I'm saying? Then we move on and we get to something
And
else.
stagnant water is not a stock pond. You know, you're feeding your stock, you got a pond, that's not stagnant water.
Right.
That's not what we're talking about. But there are plenty out there for us to take care of, and this commission has finally decided that it wants to do so, and giving us the ability to do so. So, we're gonna do it.
Does that come in front of Judge Snyder?
It will come, the violations of the ordinance will come before Judge Snyder. I've been talking with her about whether these cases need to be specially set for a time certain, or whether we just put them on our docket on Tuesdays as we do any other case. As of right now, she says, just put them on the docket as we do any other case. If they're contested, we may have to move them for a hearing, and my experience has been typically most of these will be contested.
Well, I understand what you're talking about around housing subdivisions, people piling up garbage. I've seen people around near where I live throw their garbage out the windows, cans, stuff like that, because they just don't care. And that's not right. That's not fair to the neighbor, even if they live a good bit away from them. That's not pretty to look at. But before you start voting on stuff like this, the public needs to be aware, and all of the farmers that do have ponds, you need to say this to them before you go and vote something in, because when they see that, they're gonna think, well, that's a broad spectrum, that includes me too. And they need to hear it from your mouth, out of court or the newspaper, that does not include them. Now, they might have junk tractors, they might have things that they like to collect sitting around on their property, and they're gonna think, well, here they are, they're coming after us. And if you voted in the way this is, who's the people that is going out to the constable, yes. When they go out, they say, well, that's suspect too, so I can say something about that. They need to be educated on what they can and can't do before we start amending things.
I think they're doing that, I know in some of the meetings, and I don't think anybody's gonna.
Nobody's complaining about ponds.
No, I mean,
we don't have
I'm not saying so much about ponds, but I know a lot of folks have got tractors. I've got them, Dad's got them.
I understand that.
A buddy of mine's got them all over the place and stuff like that. But if you get something like this amended and they go out and you say, yeah, you've got to clean that up, you know.
I would think that would be, if you got down to it, and it comes to us first, it doesn't go to the judge. Okay?
That's kind of why we started the subdivision vote. We voted that we work subdivisions.
It's a stepping stone to
Right.
make you vote.
Right, but,
That's where we are.
right now, as we speak, if we press the subdivision, we've got our work cut out for us.
Well, what about that subdivision that you was telling me about when that we discussed, just you and me, we were discussing that, I think it's down in your district, you said the people were pretty defiant about cleaning and always having it. Has that been addressed yet?
Oh, it's been addressed.
It's gonna take a
Oh,
court
they're
order.
all in this county like that.
It's gonna take a court order, just like the mobile home park out.
I'm just saying,
It's
people be
bad.
itemized.
But as far as where
It's going to be, they're not gonna pick on any farmers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying.
I can
anybody-
promise you that it's, the decision is not made by the constable who we pick. We assign, planning assigns who gets what. Chris sees each one of them. So, you know, if, for instance, let's say that one constable don't like Doe Jarvis, maybe all of them don't like Doe Jarvis, so we'll start picking on one. Okay? Then it's going to be that the decision, final decision is made here and with Chris. It's not going to
Your
be.
meeting in front of the
Planning.
commission.
Planning.
Okay,
Yeah, planning, run through the planning.
But when this was adopted, it was adopted for subdivision.
That's right.
It's not right, it's discrimination. It should be all over Hamilton County.
All right, the amendment. Now, we're gonna have to have a motion to approve the amendment. And it's like anything else, until you try to get this thing perfect, it'll be like the jail. It will be 10 or 15 years.
Well, we'll be like the last 5 years we've been trying to do.
This, right, yeah. That's right.
5 years.
And, you know, we're getting some things done.
We are.
We are. So,
This amendment we're getting ready to address here, that would apply, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, if we voted on this amendment, and we've already voted to address subdivision only right now. So this amendment would apply to subdivision.
As I see it, right now, this amendment would apply only to subdivision,
Okay.
subdivision lots. So the farms are, we're definitely not after the farmers.
Right.
I'm not singling out just the farms, I'm talking people that have larger tracts of property, that have,
But there's people in the county that's not on a farm.
yes, that's the larger tracts of
If they're
property.
in a subdivision, then this is gonna apply to them, to answer your
But it's
question.
not the subdivision, it's not going to apply to
Any subdivision is a re-subdivision of something else. It doesn't have to have a name. Is that correct, Chris?
That's a problem.
Okay, I'm just asking you in your opinion, what,
We've discussed what constitutes a subdivision,
Right.
and I think most of us know one when we see one. That's what it boils down to.
gotcha. A prime example though, and it's not a problem, but going down Cameron Road, the first 6 houses or 5 houses on huh?
Which side?
Or South Cameron Road, the intersection.
Let me try to finish. On the left-hand side of Hickory Shadows, the first 5 houses, or maybe 6, you'd never know they were a part of Hickory Shadows, but they are. And the reason that was done, because it was done, and the planning commission didn't have to approve it at that time, didn't have to approve the subdivision. You remember that, Mr. Clark? So there is the deed will say, it's lot number 2, or lot number 3,000, or whatever it is.
Typically, a subdivision lot is going to be defined, it may have a meets and bounds description, which means 30 degrees west, 522 feet north. That's a meets and bounds description, but typically it will also say, being lot 2 of phase 3 of 7 Oaks subdivision, something like that. That's typically the way you're gonna find it. Now, can I envision, a dispute over what's a subdivision? Sure I can.
Probably got the court systems.
But I think, as I say, we know one when we see one, because we drive by, and typically a lot of times there's a sign that says exactly what subdivision it is. And if it's not a sign, then we can go to the register of deeds office and find a deed that says it's in a subdivision, and it's got restrictive covenants. And restrictive covenants, I wish that people in the subdivisions would enforce their own restrictive covenants, and we might not be having to do some of this stuff.
Not as much.
all right. Do we have an amendment? I mean, a motion?
I'll make a motion for the amendment, apply subdivision zoning, just like we've already voted.
Second.
Motion and second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise.
Okay. Surplus property. Assessor's office there, has a typewriter. We need those individually or just all of them together? We can do it together. We can do it together. Okay. I hear a motion to. A motion here for Tim. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion on any of these? Be certain. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. Items interested, only thing on there, no action needed, but across here where SunTrust, like, they're gonna have requests, it's not parked there, my understanding here, construction. Maybe in the future also, not.
Starting in
Parking their
September.
parking lot.
Starting in September.
That's all I have.
Another health department, get some parking. Parking garage. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Next, calendar rules, Chairman Harville.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak with the calendar and rules committee? Nothing. Old business, done. Under new business, we need to, on the number 7, under the regular calendar, look at that. That wheel tax, whenever we gotta have a second reading, before we waive it for the volunteer fire and the rescue squad, a certain person, we need to, for second reading of the resolution 1820.
One motion.
Need no motion, please, on the calendar.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, then, now then vote on the review of the regular calendar. With that added. I hear a motion?
On the motion.
Second. All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Now the consent calendar, no issues.
I'll make that motion.
Second? Second. All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. That's all I have.
Thank you. Reminder, jail study committee is 7/12, 5 o'clock in the big courtroom. Anything there, Rick?
That's it, just like everybody there.
Anybody else have anything to add? Then we'll be adjourned. Thank you.
I guess another year, maybe.
Like I said, it's hard to see
Supposed to have 2 people property not for 5 cars, it's even
Okay, that'll work, that'll work. Appreciate
And he may have already checked if it comes out.
Didn't they say?
No, I didn't tell you anything. I didn't say What's wrong with me?
Same time.
It's always been the case for all counties. I have to check and get back.
Yeah. At least that wall, chairs that
If I file a claim, or I have a complaint, then there's
Anything I can check, they should.
just
3 seconds.
have you got some?
How are you?
That's the very first one I've done like that. I'll see, whenever we had our appointment, we just let's get by, so they wouldn't know if our process, I mean, even a 3 second video. I know. But anyway, oh yeah, I know my pictures. Well, see, now they're coming out with cheap. It's where I can buy the injector thing, put on the back side of it. Maybe on the wall. If I want to go that route, that much money. But anyway, she called her. How much? Another phone.
I'll find out, I'll see if we've got it. He said I've got it, well, I might.
Well, see, whenever we go to ours, they offer this 2 for $6. And I was wanting just a little bit bigger pump. I wouldn't want to go out that, really. So, Aiden said, well, I'll leave it all up to her. Good deal, y'all. So we went in, and then the phone I had, it was a 4G also. And so we took my phone. No, they took my SIM card.
You're right, yes, sir.
I mean, this is Android too, and that's Android. But anyway, he took. Yeah, I mean, it's surprising, so we didn't have to go through,
Yeah, then I've got all your.
All right.
You're elected.
Yeah.
No, I'm never gonna have one, I will not put Sprint. Either not do Sprint or that.
But now, like I said, now,
Thank you.
if we go with the new phone update, we'll go with 5G, which it's got 2 antennas, and plays off, I reckon, all the time. Okay, this has got no real phone. I'm sitting here, I got 4 or 5 bars. And over the house over there, ain't got nothing really. I'm figuring that over the house is that AT&T or Sprint or something. And it's knocking our signal down, which I only one just had like I could walk around inside the house now, and we would still have signal, but now them putting that in, or we just have to pick up. Just like I went to, talk to Extreme, see where we was at on location, at where he was at, so we know. But we're behind them. I had to go out there on the front porch.
All right, I'm going that way in a minute, I'll do that. It's good to see you, how's everything
I
going?
hope
You
that
look
goes,
good.
I hope that goes through.
Okay.
I don't know if it will or not.
Well, I can always pull it off your phone if need be.
Yeah.
You have an interesting conversation or just a general conversation?
Oh, we were talking about the, general about the farms and so forth.
But they do not realize subdivisions.
People don't have enough, if people knew this was going, they would absolutely.
Well, like Johnny said, let people know.
They need to know, that's the fair way.
That you're not doing farms. Of course, I don't know how you can say you're not when you have it in the policy that it's subdivisions. I just want to get them to say, I have lot 2 of the Joe Rose farm. It is 50 acres. Subdivision.
It's a mess, Linda, either way you go.
Yeah.
It's a mess. I'm just to see how they do. All right, I'm gonna run, excuse